Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I know it has been about 6 or 7 months at least since I posted. Also guys, I'm going to do just a quick reason on why I left, so if you want to just get to the video, skip to like minute 1.5. But basically, I don't know, I just wasn't that interested in weather, and I don't know, just for a couple months, but I am back to being very interested again, so I'm going to restart the channel. Also just some quick changes. I might not be doing severe weather anymore because it doesn't seem to get a lot of views. And obviously I don't do this for the views, but if y'all aren't watching that, I'm not going to make them. So we're just, and also I have gotten snow, so that's good. So I'll do winter forecasts, winter storm forecasts for when some more winter storms come along. But for now, let's start back on the channel with a hurricane season, like a look. I'm not doing any graphics, but I will give you a very just quick look on the activity and mainly where they can hit. Now, I know you're like, Sebastian, it's only late January. Well, TSR releases their forecast in December, so, you know, it's whatever. So, yeah, anyway, let's get started with the video. So glad to be back. Anyway, so, yep. So, TSR, let's see. They don't do landfalls, but we have our forecast for 2025. ACE index of 129, 3 intense hurricanes, 7 hurricanes, and 15 tropical storms. I don't know what this box is. Anyway, the 74-year climate norm, we're above average in that way. Now, we used the 30-year climate norm, and we are slightly above average on the ACE in that, on par with the hurricanes, intense hurricanes, and we're slightly above average with the tropical storms. And with 10-year, we are below average in every single one. But 15, 3 and 7 for intense hurricanes and hurricanes are average. ACE index, that is a little above average. And the tropical storms is still above average, but even then, it only takes one hurricane to be an intense storm. And you have to realize 3 major hurricanes, 7 hurricanes, and 15 tropical storms is still bad, even if it's not like these very above average seasons we're used to. As long as there's one bad hurricane, it can be memorable. And also it matters where the landfalls are, because really, sure, we can have a lot of storms, but if a lot of those are going out to sea, it doesn't matter. And also still, technically, this is still an above average season because of the 15 named storms. So let's get started with the other stuff. So we see with the climatology here, 2025 forecast, we are just above the 1991 to 2020 climatology in terms of the ACE index. You see here for 120 ACE for the 1915 to 2024, there's only a 40% chance of 120 ACE, while we're at about a 60% chance. And we're slightly above the 1991 to 2020 climatology, which is what we mainly use. So overall, we're above average until we get till about past 200 ACE, then we go below. So we're still technically slightly above average season. And in terms of number of hurricanes, we are honestly the lowest out of 1991 to 2020 and 1950 to 2024. We are lower than both. But the reason that is because these decimals here, you see, obviously we're not going to put a decimals for the official forecasts, but yeah, because like, look, 74, we have all these decimals and stuff. But even then, we are still forecasted above average. We are above both of these climatological norms. I cannot say that words. Overall, we're still in above average season. And again, 3 major hurricanes is still a lot, because a lot of times major hurricanes tend to hit land. I mean, you might have one that goes at the sea, but usually all that makes a bad season is one hurricane and one major hurricane hitting land. But also when multiple hit land, it's very bad. So obviously that's really all we have here. We don't really have landfall forecasts for TSR until about April. But yeah, also skip a couple minutes ahead if you just want the landfalls. I'll start going to all these other. I'm going to go to ENSO first, but you'll see me go into all these other tabs. And that's when you know, because I know that's what a lot of y'all care about. And obviously I get that. I do too, and I'll be making graphics on that in a video soon. But my next video will probably be like winter. Anyway, moving on. So these are our uncertainties. Obviously, sea surface temperatures, spring NAO, So we see this NAO. I'm going to bring that up later. Is very important. Positive spring NAO tends to be followed by a less active hurricane season through the enhancement of trade wind speed. But obviously, we cannot predict that at this time because NAO forecasts only go about till February. So this is not saying there's going to be a less active season. It is saying we have no idea. So that's why we go to these climatology models, which honestly, I'm going to be so honest with you guys, they really don't change from month to month. I mean, you have a pretty good idea of this far out. And you might be saying, and honestly, you shouldn't really, the most accurate forecasts for hurricane season don't start coming out till March. But from what I've seen, climatology models do not really change that much. So we're going to go to our IRI forecast here, and we see right now we're in a La Nina, a pretty deep one actually. I think we're about like negative 1.9, negative 1.5. It might just be negative 1. Either way, pretty moderate to strong La Nina. Sorry, I got to check that. Anyway, moving on. So as we get into February and March, we're going to go to a neutral. And as we get into the start of hurricane season here, can I pull out my pencil? Yes, I can. So around here, around here, when hurricane season starts, neutral is going to persist. But overall, the neutral is going to stay for most of the hurricane season until we get till September, October, where a La Nina could take over. So a negative neutral to a La Nina probably, meaning an overall pretty active hurricane season. And also, neutrals and La Ninas tend to cause more landfalls, but that is probably just because, they are more active. So nothing too crazy there. I do not know why that's black and white. But anyway, we are going to go to teleconnections in where we look at the Arctic Oscillation, NAO, PNA. So this is where we start to get into landfalls. And then I'll start showing you what all that means. And then we'll go to the climatology models and show you what landfalls could be like. So currently we are at a very good positive for Arctic Oscillation. NAO, we're in neutral, and so we are with the PNA. We're going to mainly look at the AO and the NAO. So, obviously, you see, we can only go until about February. February 8th is the farthest we can go out, way before hurricane season. But overall, we are going to be, like, how much does it shift? So we went from, on January 7th, to a negative 3.4 to a 3.41 on January 24th. So this goes over all the time. So the spring NAO is what we're really going to be looking at, but we cannot forecast it this far. And I will tell you what all this means in a second. So don't worry, I will not confuse y'all. But basically, we're going to be staying in a positive AO and a positive NAO, and PNA is going to drop below to the negative, but we're not going to be looking at that. Now, y'all might be asking why I'm telling you this. Do you even know what this means? I barely know what it means, too. This is one of the newer things I've learned, but basically, this is not only going to determine activity of these two, but also where the hurricanes go. So, if I can click the right tab, PNA we're not really going to look, though I will say this definitely impacts activity quite a bit. Arctic Oscillation. So this is mainly for winter, but we see a positive phase of AO causes stronger trade winds, and stronger trade winds causes a less favorable environment for hurricanes. So there'll be less hurricanes, especially going through here. But honestly, this is more of an activity thing. But a less negative phase means more trade winds here. Less trade winds, which means more storms. Obviously, because the trade winds interfere with the hurricanes. So we're going to go back to this. We see that for the AO, Arctic Oscillation, we are currently in positive, and that positive phase means less strong hurricanes due to stronger trade winds. So obviously not a very favorable environment, but as you see how much this changes, we can really not predict that at all. So honestly, that's more of a week-to-week thing. So, but the AO and NAO in spring can determine more of the hurricane season, which again we cannot predict. Now, looking at the NAO, this really affects hurricanes, like where they go. We're going to be looking at this chart real quick. So positive NAO phases, which I'm expecting that for a hurricane season, maybe like it's positive neutral to a positive NAO. And what that means is that more storms are going to be going out to sea / into the East Coast and maybe the Eastern Gulf. The reason I don't think we're going to have a very strong positive NAO is because that would mean a lot of storms are going out to sea. And while I do think we're going to have some going out to sea, we're definitely going to be seeing more of a landfalling year. And honestly, going back to this, I'm thinking thinking is we're going to stay around here, which means we are not going to have all the storms going out to sea, but we're not going to have them going to the Western Gulf. This is not nearly going to be a Yucatan Western Gulf year as it was last year and the years before. We are not going to be seeing that much storms going here, all the way here. What we're really going to be seeing is more the East Coast, Eastern Gulf, and some of the Yucatan, but not as much. So, around that neutral is where you could really get East Coast storms, Eastern Gulf storms. So not all of them going out to sea, but not all of them going just to the west. So what it means is a lot of areas that haven't been seeing hurricanes, you're going to start seeing hurricanes, but these hurricanes are not going to all be going out to sea. So I'm going to close these out now, because now we're going to be looking at landfalls. So we're going to start with the CANSIPS model. We're going to we already looked at sea surface temperatures. Nothing surprising, really. We're just above average sea surface temperatures. Nothing surprising there. And then we have below average, obviously, in some areas. So we're going to skip to June here, and we see above average precipitation for the Yucatan and the Western Gulf, and that's really the only time of the year the CANSIPS really shows it. We also have some going out to sea here, but that's always there because of hurricanes. As we go into July, we're going to see that shift more east, and we have a lot of storms going out to sea. But as we can see here, not only do we have recurves, and again, this is way before the peak of the season, but we also have some going more eastward. You see right here, which is going to start to affect the Bahamas and the East Coast. But really, the main thing, August. So this just shows above average precipitation all over the place. So it's not very helpful, but we're going to go into the CFS in a second. But we do see a lot of storms going up the East Coast and affecting and putting a big risk for the East Coast, like Florida East Coast, Carolinas, etc., because of all this above average precipitation right here. We can see the recurves right here. So all that always happens. But it also means we're going to have more going towards Florida and into the East Coast of Florida, up the coast, and also the Eastern Gulf here. We also have a lot in the West Gulf here, not very helpful. And we see here for the CANSIPS. Now we're going to see a lot going into the Yucatan, but we're also going to be seeing, again, East Coast here. We're going to be seeing Eastern Gulf. Now, again, all over the place, so hard to tell. And then October, season starts to calm down, below average precip, et cetera, et cetera. So you might be saying this did not help at all. Yeah, and this is not the only thing I'm going to be using. The main thing we're going to be using, other than like the AO and all that stuff, AO stands for Arctic Oscillation, is these analogs based on ENSO. And these are very helpful. They were very accurate last year. I used them mainly for my predictions last year, and we were pretty spot on. Like, for example, we said the Big Bend. We said the West Coast, East Coast of Florida. We had Milton. We had a lot on the Big Bend. We had 2 hurricanes on the Big Bend. Very accurate prediction last year. So that's going to be the main thing. It's what a lot of people use. CANSIPS, they're always showing above average precip, so that's where we're going to use another model. It's going to be the CFS monthly. Also, I will not be using this parameter anymore because it does not do a good job at showing like where the storms are going to go. Because it shows a location of the Bermuda High, but the strength varies too much, so it's not a very good indicator. That's why we have these analogs, which are very good ways to tell. So CFS is mainly what we're going to be using, and we see where it's way more specific here, and we actually get a lot more updates for this. So, while the CANSIPS hasn't been updated in like a month. So June, we're going to have recurves as always, but it doesn't show it's not as recurve heavy as the CANSIPS. We have some going into, lost my pencil. We have some going into the Yucatan here, and then we have some up the East Coast, Carolinas, Florida East Coast, up to the Northeast. And continuing July, that's where it really gets interesting, because while we do have some activity in the Gulf and the Yucatan, the main thing is going to be we see the Florida East Coast, the Carolinas, and we see here the Eastern and Central Gulf. And as we get farther into season, that's what really is going to be significant. And now, here we see August. We see a lot is not going on at all. In fact, we have a lot of recurves. So that could be the negative NAO, causing all the a positive NAO, causing all the recurves. But that also means a bigger risk to the East Coast. So so not a lot in August. Again, this hurricane season analogs are going to show the biggest story. That is what has been at least in my experience, the best indicator. But September, the peak of the season, very different story. We have a little bit for the West, Western Gulf, but we see here the Eastern Gulf again, the Panhandle, the Big Bend. But really, the main thing here, we see the Florida East Coast. You look at all of this right here. So not only does that mean storms are going to be going up the East Coast, but also into southern Florida potentially, like an Irma maybe. Again, I'm not forecasting hurricane tracks. I'm just saying what it looks like on here again. You can't just look at a precipitation map and say where the hurricanes are going to go. Absolutely not. But it's a good indicator. But then we have up the East Coast, we see maybe towards the Northeast, the Carolinas. Again, because for the East Coast, when the storm goes up, like we see, obviously the west side of the storm isn't as big. But when you see storms like this that are going up the East Coast, a lot of times they hug the coast. And basically, we can have like landfalls slightly in the Outer Banks maybe as it's going up the East Coast or something because it's hugging the coast, which means eye wall or some of the worst impacts can still go on land. So storms going up the East Coast like Dorian, stuff like that. While obviously it might not be getting the west side of the storm, might not getting the eye. Since they're hugging the coast, we're still getting the worst impacts on the East Coast, so it really doesn't matter. These storms going up the East Coast are really just as bad. You don't need to be getting the eye or the eye. Well, and I'm not saying like tropical storm impacts. I'm saying we could be getting major impacts. Because when it hugs the coast like this, it does not matter if it makes landfall or not. Landfall does not always matter. And as we go into October, we do see a lot in the Gulf again. We could be seeing more central Gulf activity. And up the East Coast, the Northeast we see could be a big one here, and that's it for then. So, main thing now, analogs. Our analogs of 2013, 1967, 2011, 1970, and 2000 all paint a similar picture. We're going to mainly be focusing on 2013 and 1967, as those are the main analogs. But let's see here. Tropical storm frequency. We do see what I was saying. And also, I'm not going to have a map, but I'm going to be circling things at the end of the video showing you where, as of right now, I think the main stuff could be. And this has been holding for a couple months, and they don't, like I said, they don't change much. But like we see, the Eastern Gulf, we could be seeing towards the Panhandle. We do have a lot in the Bay of Campeche, but I think that, as we saw in the Yucatan, but I think that is mainly early season. And also, that does not exactly mean Western Gulf because he's mainly going to Mexico. So for the United States, there's still really nothing in the Western Gulf. But as we see here, up the East Coast, we see the Northeast, the Carolinas, and all of these storms that are hugging the Florida coast. That means the Florida East Coast could be a big thing. But then we got the Carolinas, the Northeast, a big year. And I'm going to be honest, it kind of is annoying how every year I see them putting a hot spot on the Florida East Coast or the Carolinas. The reason I never said last year is, the Carolinas, the Florida East Coast, are getting more hurricanes than the other places. The reason I did not say that they're going to get so many hurricanes, is just because climatology has told us that they get so many storms, and storms go up the East Coast, and they affect them all the time. Does not mean they're going to get it. But this year, it really seems promising for them for a hurricane. So we see landfalls in the Carolinas and the Northeast and even Florida a bit. We see going southern here, but also them just hugging the coast is going to be a big problem. You see this blue shows below average, but the fact that we see all this hugging the coast, strong enough hurricane, you can be seeing major hurricane impacts. I'm not forecasting a hurricane. I'm just saying you still can get just as bad impacts when a hurricane hugs the coast. Landfall does not matter. Like Dorian was very bad to the Florida East Coast and Carolinas. I think we even got major hurricane impacts in a lot of places. I'm not sure though. I do not remember that. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, as it was like 6 years ago. But it was still horrible. So anyway, let's go into the actual analogs. We're going to be going from most important to least important. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got all of them up here. Let's go. So we're just going to be looking at the maps because we're showing landfalls here. And we're going to be zooming in, though, because I can't draw all on this with the pencil. Actually, maybe I can. Let's try it, guys. Let's go. Oh, actually, I can. So let me take it back. We're going to use maps here. Okay, so most important analog, 2013. Not very busy. But we're using the ENSO to, the thing I was showing you, the analogs, that uses the ENSO to show tracks, not activity. And again, like, you see how all these are like tropical storms? We only got like 2 hurricanes here. That does not mean the storms are going to be weak. All the analogs I showed you last year, remember, all the storms were weak, but now we got stronger storms nowadays, so obviously do not be fooled by the weakness. Also, again, these analogs have been very good with showing tracks and landfalls, but the map I showed does not show activity at all. And again, TSR is still forecasting above average season. So even if the storms this season are less active, do not be fooled by that. But this was a 14 storms, which is very above average for this time. Now I see weak hurricanes, but again, we still saw 3, and the TSR forecast 3 major hurricanes, 7 hurricanes. So still very active in that term. Like these analogs are only for tracks, which is they've been proved very accurate. So do not be fooled by the inactivity. Anyway, I'm going to stop yapping about that. We see the Yucatan as they showed. Now we do see something in the Central Gulf. Like I said, we might see some Central Gulf later season. But what I'm really focusing on is Florida. The Florida Big Bend this seems they don't need anything more. I don't know why this is there. Like they really don't need anything more. We got the recurves here, but one of the big things is this probably did not affect Florida that much. It was a tropical depression, but again, storms are stronger nowadays. So we do see stuff up the East Coast. We see this going up the East Coast, Northeast Carolinas and stuff, but this going up the East Coast and a stronger storm. And look how close this is. Going to be a big threat for the Florida East Coast and the Carolinas. For significant storms and even tropical storms, if they get close enough, they can be bad. Here, this was actually a pretty active season. Again, it doesn't matter, but 13 storms, 6 hurricanes, 1 major hurricane. In 1967, that was absolutely horrible. So, we see here, Yucatan, 1 storm, maybe 2. Good bunch of recurves, but then again, we technically have that every season. Nothing really for the Gulf at all. But look at this. Look at all of these storms. Look at all these storms that get like right on the northeast coast. Honestly, these storms could be pretty big getting up there. That's a big, significant risk. Tropical storm, hurricane impacts. If the storms are strong enough, that can bring big impacts to the northeast as we see. And look at the Carolinas; they're all up in there. And look how close they get to the Florida coast. That again, storms going up the Florida coast, even into the Florida coast and in the Carolinas. A big risk for the Florida East Coast, the Carolinas, and the Northeast. A massive risk. Oops. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up with the last 3 seasons here because this video is getting lengthy. Again, the Central Coast a bit and the Yucatan. But again, look at this. Look at all of these recurves. Again, more recurves than last season potentially. But again, East Coast, you're going to be seeing way more storms. It's going to seem like a very active season because we are going to be seeing way more storms. And again, there's always a lot of recurves. But yeah, we see, again, the Carolinas, the Northeast. Carolinas in the Northeast. And again, getting right up on the Florida coast. And again, with more significant storms, the map looks a lot more colorful. That's going to be very bad for the East Coast. And again, I'm not saying that all the storms are going out to sea. This is just 1 year again here. Like here, they were hugging the coast. They were way more significant impacts to the United States coast. So obviously, very bad. Again, we're not always going to be seeing this much recurves. It's going to just depend on the NAO phase. But usually, storms can be very bad now, and even just as they get close to the coast, it can be very bad. So, but I doubt we're going to see this many recurves. We're going to go to the 1970 season. We have a lot of recurves here, but we see a lot more hitting land. So we see some with Yucatan here. This is more of a Gulf year, but again, look, Carolinas getting up into the Northeast there, Florida East Coast, Southern Florida there, and Eastern Florida. This is one of the lesser analogs, but yeah, so a lot hitting land. So it's going to be a big risk, and I think a Central Gulf could have a significant risk later in the season. Finally, honestly, I think this is the best one so far. We have the Eastern Gulf, a little bit of the Yucatan, the Florida East Coast, the Carolinas, and the Northeast. Definitely going to be the biggest risk. So what I'm seeing here is we're going to have a good amount of recurves, but again, we did have that in 2024. We always do. We're going to be seeing, but if the storms get strong enough, we could be seeing pretty bad storms getting pretty close to the Florida East Coast, like a Dorian situation. Maybe even going into Southern Florida. So very bad storms for the Florida East Coast. The Florida East Coast seems to be at a very big risk in Southern Florida, as well as the Carolinas and the Northeast. Carolinas for very bad storms, and even for the Northeast, because you're not used to that, and the Eastern Gulf as well, and maybe even the Central Gulf towards the later season. So we're going to color code this, actually. Red, worst. We're going to have the Florida East Coast and the Southern Florida, and the Carolinas. Yellow, we're going to have the Northeast. Y'all had a very above average risk. It's just that obviously storms are weaker when they get up to you, but we have seen hurricanes and major hurricanes get up to you. So it's not that you're at a lesser risk. It's just that obviously it's harder for storms to get up there. But you are as just of an above average risk, like just as high basically as the Carolinas and Florida, East Coast. It's just that obviously it's way harder for storms to get up there. So we're not going to really put you as high as a risk. And we're also going to put the Eastern Gulf there, as well as the Yucatan. Again, I'm not saying this is the forecast of this analog season right here. It's just the last map, and it's a pretty good idea. And we're going to say lesser risks are going to be the upper West Coast here, and maybe just, yeah, I think that's it, the Western Gulf. So yeah, Western Gulf going to be a lesser risk, and we're going to put a question mark for the Central Gulf because we don't really know yet. But also Canada is going to be a significant risk. We'll put them in yellow here because a lot of the recurves go towards New Labrador. I don't even know the name. Nova Scotia. That's all I know. Anyway, and Newfoundland and stuff. Anyway, guys, that is going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great night. Please give me feedback, comments, everything. Anyway, have a great night, guys. I know I'm posting this late, or I might be posting this in the morning. Who knows? Anyway, have a great night. Goodbye.